everyone, and welcome to the Chief Science Officer's Zoom In on Science calls, where we learn about STEM professionals' careers and the impact of their jobs on modern life. This is a really great opportunity for us to keep learning while we're in this crazy quarantine time. So let's welcome Deia Schlosberg, the producer/director of the documentary The Story of Plastic, and many more. Sorry, I'm probably butchering your name.
That's fine. Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this. This is super cool. Okay, so I just made a little timeline to kind of illustrate generally my path. I was born and grew up in a little itty bitty town called Newark Valley in upstate New York. You can see it's very, very green. There's lots of woods and cows and cornfields where I grew up. I went to school at Washington University in St. Louis, where I studied earth and planetary science and visual communications. I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to combine those things, but I knew that I was really excited about both of those topics and figured that I would figure that part out as long as I followed paths that I was passionate about. I had a sense that it would work out, even though, you know, it was stressful at the time and hard to make decisions like majors and everything. But I did follow my passions there, and I'm thankful for that. Once I graduated from school, because I majored in a couple seemingly different degrees, I ended up working in all these different jobs, mostly as an illustrator, animator, graphic designer on one hand, and then an educator, like outdoor field science, environmental science educator on the other hand. So I had these two kind of parallel career paths going on. After doing all these jobs for a while, I took 2 years and walked the length of the Andes Mountains in South America for a lot of reasons, but primarily I wanted to learn more about living sustainably and learn from people who had been living sustainably for generations, to hopefully bring some of those lessons back to my practice as an educator, because I felt like we were missing the boat on a lot of issues of sustainability. And it was during that 2 years of hiking that I had a lot of time to think. You can see in that picture up there was a lot of open space and thought time. So it was during that I kind of realized documentary filmmaking combines all these things really nicely. My earth science background and visual communications and art, and through documentary filmmaking, I can do all these things that I love and explore all different topics. Like each film is is a chance to dive into a new topic and really learn about it. So I went to grad school at Montana State University in Bozeman. They have this super cool graduate program there called Science and Natural History Filmmaking. And it's for scientists that want to really specialize in communicating science. So that's what I did until I graduated in 2013 from that. So once I graduated and became the end of my years as a student, I was actually working as a filmmaker to pay for grad school. So I did several projects for local organizations. A lot of ecology organizations are based in Bozeman because it's so close to Yellowstone National Park. So I did a lot of projects related to wildlife and habitat. And then my thesis project as part of that program was called Backyard, and it looked at fracking, hydrofracking, and the impacts that has on local communities and people's health and environmental health. And that led me to meet Josh Fox, who's a filmmaker who made the movie Gasland. If any of you have heard of that, Gasland and Gasland 2. So I started working with him and produced his next film called How to Let Go of the World, which is looks at the impacts of climate change all over the world. I worked on a film called Cold Love, which follows an Arctic explorer who's been traversing polar ice caps and peaks over the past 25 years and seeing firsthand how climate change has impacted those environments. And then I co-produced a film called Awake, which looked at the Standing Rock event movement. Following that, I also co-produced The Reluctant Radical, which asks questions of like, how far are you willing to go for what you believe in, and especially if what you believe in is science and wanting to combat the negative effects of a rapidly changing climate. So that looked at activism and civil disobedience. And then finally, we get to the story of plastic, which I started working on, as I was saying before we started, the idea for it first came up about 8 years ago. And then about 3 years ago, we we actually started like researching and scouting and filming. And then it was like a 3-year process of filming and editing and excuse me. And then we released that last fall. And right now, I've been doing a lot of Q&A, so I'm losing my voice. Right now, I'm working on a documentary series that is exploring the idea of universal basic income. That's the idea that Andrew Yang was proposing when he was running for president. But very simply, it's the idea that everybody should have enough money that they can survive. And that should be automatic. Like, basic human rights should be promised to everybody. Just, we should all be able to exist. That should be built into our society. So it's exploring that idea through several different households all over the US. Lastly, this film just premiered yesterday on the Discovery Channel. They decided to show it for the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And our whole team was really excited that it was shown on Discovery because it has had the opportunity to reach a huge audience. Discovery has millions of people all over the world that watch it. So we're going to reach a whole lot of people because they picked it up. So that was really fortunate. It's really hard in filmmaking to get, I mean, it's a challenge to make the film, but then I think it's almost harder to get your film shown widely and broadly. It's like a whole other part of the profession that you don't really learn about in school. You learn how to make films, but then sharing them with the world is a whole different beast. But the story of plastic itself looks at the whole system of plastic, from extraction from the ground, from fracking and fossil fuel extraction, to petrochemical processing plants where plastics are made, and then where they're used. This drawing up here is from one of the animations in the film, just showing how plastic is ubiquitous in our everyday lives, and so many things are made out of plastic that didn't used to be. We went all around the world and we talked to people that are involved with plastic at all phases in its life cycle, from when it's first created to when it's disposed of. We talked to recyclers who see the reality of the recycling system and how it was originally created to recycle glass and aluminum and paper, and not really built to process plastics, and especially not the volume of plastics that we have now. So we looked at what the results of that are. There's a lot of archival footage in it that we found from old commercials from oil and gas companies promoting new materials. We kind of showed that juxtaposed to where those materials end up in the world, which you can see here in a lot of these shots. on the lower right there, that's Manila Bay in the Philippines. And the plastic was just washing ashore after a big storm. There's another Manila Bay shot at the bottom there. There's a couple of fishermen who say they're catching more and more plastic instead of fish. Now they catch about 60% fish and 40% plastic. So it's getting harder and harder to sustain themselves and their communities and their livelihoods. Oh, and then the top right, I haven't talked about that yet. When plastics aren't able to be recycled, a lot of times they end up getting burned, incinerated. They say it's for energy, but it's a very inefficient process. There's an incinerator in India, very, very close to a lot of communities, like surrounded by communities. And so they were telling us about all the health impacts and respiratory damage that people in those communities had because of the incinerators and because they're burning plastic, toxic chemicals, toxic fumes are released. One of the big takeaways from the film was how quickly this has all been changing. So half of the plastic that has ever existed has been made in the last 15 years. So not that long at all. And most of that is single-use plastic, multi-layer plastic, sachets, like little single-serve things like ketchup packets, things that are made from multiple layers, and really low-value plastic. So it's impossible to recycle it. So it's meant to end up in the environment. Like when these companies make these bags, like chip bags and wrappers and all this single-serve stuff, there's no right place to put it because there's nothing you can do with it at that point. It is going to end up in the environment. So it was we really wanted to shine a light on that fact. Like, as much as people say, oh, it's okay, you can recycle, most of what we recycle actually can't be recycled. Only 2% of the plastic that we recycle actually gets turned into something equally as valuable as what it started as. Everything else is turned into something that's degraded, or it just ends up in the environment, in the oceans, in the landfills, in incinerators, and then in the atmosphere. So what we really need to do is change this system, change the making of these plastics and production of these single-use items that are meant to be just thrown away.
Thank you very much for telling us about your work, because I'm really interested in film myself. While we were learning about what you do, participants have left questions in the chat. But first one is, what is your favorite part about your job?
My favorite part of my job is that I get to really, I have two favorite parts. I love that each project, I really get to research a topic in depth. And I pretty much choose what I do my films on. So if I'm really interested in something, I can do a film about it, and then it's my job to learn more about it. So it's almost like being a professional student, in that I get paid to learn. It's my job to learn and collect as much information as possible, and then figure out the best way to put all of that together. The other part of my job that I love is production, is when we're actually in the field filming with people, depending on the topic. In grad school, I filmed with a lot of animals out in the mountains. But it's an interaction with people and a place that you can't get otherwise. I've been in so many interesting places and situations that I would never be in if I didn't have a camera, if I wasn't making a film about it. I think people really want to be heard. People really want to be listened to. And so many people have stories, but know where to share them. And as a filmmaker, it's really special to be trusted with somebody else's story. And then I get to meet these amazing people and know these amazing people that I would never come in touch with otherwise. So I feel really lucky all the time.
What skills do you have to apply in your job?
All of them. That's the third thing I think I like the most about my job, is that it's so many different jobs. I never, ever, ever get bored. Every part of the process is a different skill set. I studied Earth and planetary science, and in making this film, we've covered the topic of fracking, and there's a lot of earth science involved in that topic. I studied like the carbon cycle and water cycles, and the chemistry that I took for my mineralogy classes in college, like that helped me understand the chemistry of the going on in the plastic production industry, and then the waste products from that and how it affected human health. And there's just, it's kind of endless research. And then like on the artistic side of things, photography, drawing, using past musical experience to help with edit and pacing. And there's a lot of writing, writing out ideas, writing out scripts, writing out summaries and proposals to get funding to be able to make the film. And then I get to do a lot of public speaking once a film is released. This round has been pretty different because it's all over Zoom, when usually I'm traveling all over the country and all over the world to talk to different people and go meet with audiences in person and do workshops and panels and stuff. So this is a different take on that, but it's still cool. Saying a lot of different skills are involved, and it keeps it really interesting and fun.
Next question is, what advice would you give to your 14-year-old self?
That's a really good question. So my 14-year-old self kind of went all out and never took breaks, and said yes to everything, every activity, every assignment, every job. I just tried to get as much experience as possible, which I think was good in some respects, but I have definitely burned out at different points in my life, where it was just too much and too stressful, and I didn't feel like I was doing a good job at any one of those things because I was spread way too thin. And some of that was because I felt like I had to do these things. Like I felt an obligation or responsibility for whatever reason, even if it wasn't something I was really excited about. So I would tell my 14-year-old self to trust yourself, and it's great to explore all different things. But if you know you're really passionate about some things and not others, really trust yourself and go with those things that you're really excited about so you don't get burned out.
What advice do you have for students to do to improve the condition of our planet and stop the condition from getting worse?
A good question. So I don't think there's one single answer. I think the best thing you can do is plug yourself in where your skills are and where your passions are, and that's where you're going to have the most impact. I mean, there are so many schools and organizations and places doing great work, try to better the planet, better society. And if you pursue what you feel like you're really excited about and what you're really good at, you can find a place to plug in.
What was your initial reaction when Discovery decided to air the story of plastic?
Surprise. I was worried about where this film would end up because we call a lot of companies out by name as part of the problem, and a lot of broadcasters get advertising money from those companies. So I wasn't going to be super shocked if nobody really wanted to show our film, because they might lose money from their advertisers. So the fact that Discovery was brave and picked it up, I was shocked and thrilled.
CSO Chalet, which film that you've worked on have you been most passionate about? And if viewers get one takeaway from the documentary, what do you hope that is?
That's really hard. Yeah, that's a really hard question. I don't take on a project unless it's exactly what I want to do at that moment. Yeah, I mean, films involve so much of yourself, so much work and so much heart, and it's like your life just is that project for the time that you're working on it. So if you don't totally believe in it, it's not gonna work. I mean, shorter films for sure. You can jump in and out of shorter films and learn how things work and learn about different topics, and that's awesome to get those under your belt. But when it comes to feature films and films that take 5-8 years to make, you gotta love it. Key takeaway, I think, is to question where you get your information from. Make sure that you're checking your sources and paying attention to who's shaping the narrative that you're being told. There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of messaging that's not just trying to express the truth. It's trying to get you to do something or buy something. And I think being aware of that messaging and really analyzing it is really healthy, and forming your own opinions and doing your own research. Yeah.
I think I totally took that away too. Cool. To do your own research on these types of things. So yeah, I think the message definitely went across. So from CSO Kirsten, do you have any recommendations as to how to make an inspiring and powerful video that people will want to view?
I think the most compelling videos are the ones that let you really meet somebody and get to know somebody and their story. Like in the film, the idea of zero waste communities, I think is awesome and really interesting and exciting, but I don't think that would have been as strong if we didn't have Freud to tell us about it. And if Freud didn't take us through those communities and show how that kind of system works in real life, and tell us a little bit about his background. And even though I really care about the issue and I'm interested in zero waste communities, I care more because all of a sudden I've met this really cool guy that I like, Freud, and he has dedicated his life to this. So hearing it from him means a lot more than just the information itself.
Yeah, sorry, I keep interrupting. From CSO Valentina, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced when developing this film?
aside from fundraising, because that's always a huge challenge in film, with this one in particular, it was trying to streamline so much information, trying to distill it into something that was digestible in 95 minutes. Yeah, looking at it, a huge global problem with all different facets and connections to every part of the world. And yeah, trying to condense that in a way that's not completely overwhelming.
So thank you for that answer. And the next question from CSO Juan is, do you think that with your film you'll be able to give the message that we have to choose methods that pollute the planet less?
I hope we've made clear what happens when we don't do that. We have lots of examples of that not working out. So yeah, I mean, I hope everybody comes away and being able to envision a different way.
So from CISO Austin, do you believe in the possibility of sending trash out into outer space?
That could be interesting to explore, but I don't think that that's a solution to the problem that we're faced with right now. I think the solution is to stop making all this stuff and all this waste in the first place.
Yeah, I read some articles on that. It's a pretty interesting idea, I think. CSO Benjamin, what are you doing now during social distancing, and how are you continuing to work?
Good question. Filmmaking is, I mean, I happen to be in phases of my projects that I can do remotely, like this. And in my other in the Bootstraps project, looking at universal basic income, we're in the edit phase. So that's mostly sitting at a computer or you know, in meetings with people. So I kind of lucked out, you could say, with the timing of my projects. Because if we were in production and traveling around and filming when this hit, that would all just, I mean, it would just all have to stop. But I'm able to keep working on releasing this one and then editing the other one. But yeah, I mean, I'm social distancing. I'm staying put at home, being super careful and cautious, and I know that yeah, I don't want to put anybody else at risk. So I'm taking it really seriously.
Thank you for all of your answers. I think that those are all the questions that have been left in the chat. So thank you for your wonderful contribution today. Before we close this call, what advice would you give to us as young leaders for our future?
That's a big one. Believe in yourselves. I think we all have more power and a stronger voice than we're led to believe we do.
A couple more questions. I don't know if you have a few more minutes, sure. Or we've kind of kept you on long and we had our whole crazy intro, but Valentina wants to know, how does it feel after completing a film that has taken an extensive period of time to create?
It never really feels like it's done. I mean, there are different steps that are really exciting and really great. Like the first time you show it in front of an audience is really exciting. The first time it broadcasts on TV is really exciting. But films have a life that go beyond just the last thing that you shoot or the last cut that you make or the last export of the file that you send out. So it's not like one huge relief. It kind of comes in bits, which I think is good, because after you've spent that long working on something, you can kind of
overdo it, maybe.
What?
Do you feel like sometimes you overdo it because you're so creative that you need a stopping point, or that you say it's never really done, but
right. I mean, I think most filmmakers would say that you never really finish a film, you just stop working on it.
yeah. So a question from Chalet, do you have one that was the most fun?
The one I'm working on now, Bootstraps, I'm really enjoying because it's following the same people for several years. So I don't just go in somewhere, meet someone, interview them, learn about their story and leave. I'm really getting to know these people over time, and they have incredible stories, and it's been really powerful to just have them be part of my life now.
Yeah, kind of feel like you've known them, not only making that movie, but telling their story. We talk about telling our story all the time. As chief science officers, we ask them to not only make videos, but share what they're working on and the impact that they're making. So it's very important that they hear what you're saying, right? So we did have Lisa on, and I want to give a little shout out to Stefan, who is in Indonesia, and thank you for joining us tonight. So Lisa has a really good question about these tough conversations that you are having. Have you ever felt like your life is in danger when you're filming some of these documentaries?
Yeah, I've had some very, very tough moments. I think on several of the films I've worked on, I don't try to put myself in situations that are super risky or dangerous, but just the nature of some of the topics I cover, I definitely run into that.
Josh was curious about fake advertising on food, right? Is there any goal to have some regulation on fake advertising on some of the plastic products?
I think that would be awesome. Yeah, I think that would be amazing if there was.
Anya wanted to know, what was the turning point when you decided to take action on making an informing documentary versus other types of films?
I would rather make other types of films, honestly. I just want to tell stories and create, but I feel like access and skills and everything that I have, I feel like I have to use them for good, or to better the world however I can. So I just end up making films about these heavy topics like climate change and plastic pollution and global warming and
yeah, it's pretty tough. I can't imagine that it wouldn't get to you after some time, right? That it's a tough place to be in, but you're telling very important stories. And that will lead us into our final question before CSO Sarah does our closing. But what steps are you taking personally to help the environment? And I know telling the story is huge, but are there any specific tips or things that you would challenge the CSOs to do? That comes from CSO Mo in Kuwait.
Cool. Good question, Mo. I mean, I tried just across the board to live pretty simply and pretty low footprint. My job, unfortunately, unfortunately, requires me to travel a lot, which is high carbon usage. But I know that that's a balance that I have to figure out, like how much impact will me traveling have if I can share these stories with millions of people. But aside from that, I try to live a pretty simple, low carbon lifestyle. I'm mostly vegan. I try to use all reusable packaging as much as possible. Bike and take public transport as much as possible. But really, I think what the biggest thing that I can do personally is talk about these things with other people.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. I actually see one more question that seems actually pretty interesting in the chat. From S, I was wondering, did you see any countries using plastic innovatively?
Again, like I didn't see anything that was a solution to the problem, but certainly in the Philippines, there were several groups of women from various islands that were using all different kinds of plastic for different purposes. Like they would make building blocks out of bottles. They would fill plastic bottles with other scrap plastic until they were really dense, and then attach them together in these units and like use them to build structures and homes. So that's pretty innovative.
Wow, yeah, that's super cool because it kind of adds like something to like when people can't find materials for making things like homes or whatnot. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. And thank you very much, Sierra, for your wonderful contribution today. And again, we thank you a lot for this information about you and your filmmaking career. We will be sure to send you a proper thank you email, and we really hope that you can participate in another call someday to help us continue with Zoom in on science. Like the motto says, don't just hope it happens, make it happen. So see you guys soon, and thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was wonderful. So CSOs, if you'll do our closing, if you could go ahead and unmute. I think it's incredible. Sarah, you did a great job tonight on the call. And again, I apologize for the crazy introduction, but I thank you so much, Deia, for staying on and staying extra time to spend with our CSOs, our Chief Science Officers. They really are doing big things. So maybe sometime in the future, we could get you to help us teach them how to tell the story in an exciting and very honest ways as well. So, all right. So from the International CSO Director of Student Success, CSOs, don't just hope it happens.
Make it happen.
Make it happen.
Make it happen.
Deia, thanks again. It was a pleasure. You're incredible. Thank you for answering all of their questions.
Thank you so much.